Hello, this is Terry Martell, co-founder of Power Palace Gym. Today we are going to talk about the historical swordsmanship classes that I'm going to be teaching here at Power Palace Gym starting next month. So it might seem kind of strange, to have a 80s, 90s themed bodybuilding gym with powerlifting, sports conditioning that also teaches, how to fight with swords, right? It seems like the strangest mashup. And some people have mentioned that to me, but in my mind it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, you gotta think about what 80s fitness was all about, right? Like, you had people like Arnold Schwarzenegger who were, doing the Conan movies. You had all these swords and sandals movies with these big old bodybuilders in it, the Barbarian Brothers, all these different bodybuilders who are doing all these fantasy, fantasy movies and TV shows and things like that. So in my mind, it actually makes a lot of sense to have a bodybuilding place that also teaches swordsmanship, because then you can be Conan the Barbarian in real life, right? So additionally to that, I just think fighting with swords is fun. Like, swords is cool, right? And it's something unique. It's something that you don't see being offered at a lot of different gyms. And it is a kind of a newer martial art in the sense of being a sport. Of course, swordsmanship is a very old martial art, but in terms of being a modern sport, it is fairly relatively new. It's been mostly rediscovered and reconstructed from very old manuscripts that people have been studying, trying to reproduce these martial arts, which died off because people just stopped fighting with long swords and rapiers and sabers. They just stopped fighting with them, and then so therefore the arts were lost. But they have survived in the form of these manuscripts that people had in private collections. And now historians translated them, deciphered them, did some experimental archaeology with it, and have reconstructed these martial arts. And now we can use them as sports. So the sport is called HEMA, which is the acronym being Historical European Martial Arts. Very big mouthful, probably not the term I would have went with for historical swordsmanship. Nevertheless, HEMA is the term. So HEMA is a modern day sport focused on dueling, mostly, against opponents using the historical techniques that have been passed down in surviving source manuscripts that describe the martial arts. Now, in my case, I teach an Italian, it's called Italian Longsword, but it really, a lot of these guys all were in what is now Germany. It's referred to as armazzari, which is medieval Italian for the art of arms, as recorded by Fiore di Liberi, who was a 14th century imperial knight of the Holy Roman Empire. He was a master swordsman, and he went around teaching and instructing people in how to fight in this secretive martial art. I mean, he literally refers to it as the secret art of princes and kings, and has instructions in his manuscript to not let the everyday peasants learn this martial art, because they would corrupt it and various other things. So it's like, I think it's kind of cool, actually, that we're practicing a secret martial art. Like, how cool is that, right? Like, you watch, like, these, I grew up watching these, like, Hong Kong action flicks, and very often the protagonist, like, has to learn some secret martial arts that only a few people know, that's passed down by these, these scrolls, these secret scrolls. Like, that is literally what armazzari is. Armazzari is literally a secret martial art which was historically only known to a few people, a lucky few, and it was passed down by these manuscripts, right? And that's pretty awesome, in my opinion. And that's kind of why, one of the aspects of why I like it. So let's talk about the tools that we use for it, because some people think that swordsmanship is LARPing, or live action role playing. It is definitely not that. Now, there's definitely people that do types of historical battle, and they put on chainmail and they put on plate mail and helmets and things like that. But that is not what HEMA is. HEMA is actually a more sport-oriented construction using modern-day equipment. So we use modern-day, neck protection, gorgets. We use actual fencing masks, okay? Real fencing masks. We have special jackets that are puncture resistant. We don't wear metal. Some of them have plastic in it, but it's mostly padded, puncture resistant material, the same used by sport fencers for Olympic fencing. It's just a little more heavy duty, more reinforced, more padding in there. We do use some designs that are based off of historical armor. For example, these are the gauntlets that are used, a very popular type of gauntlet used for hand protection because it's a good design, it's a mitten design. But see, it's not made out of metal or anything, it's made out of ballistic resistant plastics and puncture resistant fabrics. So it's very, very different. Anyway, one thing that is very similar to historical training tools is the feather sword. So we have here a steel blunt training sword that is commonly used for longsword training. It's called the feather sword, which is German for feather sword. Basically, it is designed to be a safe training tool. It's blunt, okay, it doesn't have a sharp edge. Usually have a button tip. In my case, I put arrow blunts at the end of this so that it's even less chance of having a serious injury to somebody when you're doing thrusting practice. It has a special type of blade that is designed to bend when you thrust into the opponent versus a more actual, like a real sword, which would have a much stiffer blade so that when you're thrusting, you're trying to, maximize the force, penetration, so you can puncture through weak parts of someone's armor, like chainmail in their armpits and things like that. Okay, this is designed to safely bend when you thrust somebody directly in the chest or in the head or things like that. Okay, it also has what's called the Schild, German for shield, which is designed to catch a blade. So if you have another sword here and somebody is coming down at you, literally you intercept that blade at the shield instead of at the crossguard, which could potentially injure your hands. There's a greater chance of injuring your hands by catching the blades using the crossguard versus using the shield, which is a lot more safe, basically. There's also different types of feather sword. Okay, there's ones that have shields, there's ones that don't. I'm not going to get into the whole range of it. There's lots of different manufacturers out there. Here we have some of the cheaper Red Dragon feather swords that were made a couple of years ago. They were concept for mass production. I got them rather cheaply. Not a lot of people like them, but I think they actually are very good for beginners for teaching them how to use the basic techniques of armor's art. And here I have a more traditional straight blunt training sword. It still has the ability to flex in the thrust, but it better simulates the type of sword that the people in Fiore's time would have actually used for training, because feather swords are actually a couple, I think about a century or two ahead from his time. They would use something probably more similar to this Italian scrimmier. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about techniques, right? Because there's some things about swordsmanship that might surprise you. So for this, I'm going to actually not be wearing shoes, just to make it a little bit easier for people to see what I am doing with my legs and my feet, which is actually a really important part of swordsmanship. There are lots of martial arts out there where you're supposed to have a very, strong, you move on your toes, you definitely do, right? But swordsmanship of all martial arts, you really focus on being on your toes, right? You're really on the foot of your toes. Okay, being flat-footed on your heels, not really where you want to be. You want to be able to move very, very quickly and rapidly and direct force. And you don't need a quite as strong of a foundation of a stance, in my opinion, because you're using a force multiplier as your primary delivery system for attacking the opponent. So because a sword has a sharp edge on it, you don't need as much force to be able to harm your opponent as you might need if you're using, your fists or your legs or something of that nature, right? It's a giant knife, basically, in your hands that is designed to really screw somebody up if you just tap them, right? So you don't need to quite have as much of a stance, but you do still need to have a good stance. And the basic stance in arms art is called posta di donna, which is the guard of the lady, guard of the queen. Lots of different ways you can translate that. The basic idea, I think, at least was told to me, the popular consensus is it's named after the Virgin Mary, actually. So you have your blade your sword up in your hands here, and you're going to actually rest it literally on your shoulder, here in the unsharpened portion of the blade. You're going to have it up here, and your crossbar is literally up against your armpit here. You're going to take your left hand, and you're going to grab the bottom parts of the pommel and actually use that pommel to help you deliver your cuts in a very mechanically efficient way. So if I go to deliver a cut, I first have the blade start to go out in front of me. You never want to move in front, of your blade, because your blade is actually protecting you from getting attacked by your opponent. You can just run out there, stick your head out there, he's going to strike you in the head, and you're going to be dead. That's not good for you. So before you move, you want to have your blade in front of you first. So, and as you're doing this, you're actually going to pivot on your back foot. And it's very similar to how you would deliver a cross in boxing or karate or other type of straight punch, okay? You're going to pivot like that and use your legs to generate force, just like with a punch. And as you come out, then you're going to take a step, maximize that force delivery through your body mechanically, and you're going to strike somewhere in the head and the neck of the opponent. And then now you're in what's called a long guard position. And from the long guard position, you're going to pull back on the sword with your bottom hand, your left hand using the pommel. You're going to cut the opponent and slice down to what is now considered to be the boar's tooth guard, no doubt named because it's similar to the tusks on a hog that are used to, shrapnel somebody. So putting it all together, you're going to go like this, okay? And then from this position, you can do a lot of different other attacks. You can, of course, make the guard of the lady on the left-hand side and deliver another cut, okay? Or you can simply do a cut using the back side of your sword, often referred to as the reverse edge of the sword. Make a cut here up to them. You could also thrust them. You can do a variety of different things. You can defend from this position in any number of ways, okay? And that's just the basics of how to deliver a cut. And it's kind of unique, when you think about swordsmanship, you think of things like kendo, okay, things you're very familiar with, and you've got the blade up in front of you all the time. And that's a long guard, that's a cool position. And how often do you think about, I'm going to be back here, right? I'm going to use it almost like a baseball bat sort of looking position. But then when the opponent comes out, I'm going to strike at them by stepping backward and using the momentum of my body to swing, or by going forward like this. Okay? It's kind of deceptive in a way. And that's probably why Armazzari was such an effective secret martial art, because it had positions that seemed like you're very wide open to your opponent, but you really are just sort of trapping your opponent, you're tricking your opponent. You're able to move in different ways to trick your opponent. So little basics of some of the Armazzari swordsmanship and some of the things you can kind of learn if you come check out Power Palace. And try a lesson here, free charge first lesson, and see how you like it. Don't want to make this video too long because there's upload limits for Instagram, but I hope you got something out of this. Hope you find something about this you find interesting. Thanks, and see you guys in the next video.